Good to go.
I'd like to call this regular council meeting for the town of Fort Erie to order. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are all sitting in our various locations are the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Anishinaabe people. Madam Clerk, would you do the invocation, please?
We meet to serve our community and endeavor to be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Let us be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chamber minds that think and hearts that feel, so that in our deliberations we may display imagination, wisdom, and courage, and the will to do our work for the good of all.
Thank you. And the roll call, please.
All members of council are present, your worship. Regional Councilor Encina sends his regrets.
Thank you. In terms of announcements this evening, just three. The first has to do with an issue with respect to the Graybo Road allowance that leads to the to Lake Erie off of Terrace Lane, I'm sorry, which rose last week. There's some issue that the town is looking into in terms of ownership of property at the end of that road allowance to the lake. We've hired a title searcher. This land was not moved into land titles from the registry system, which would indicate that there's some confusion with respect to who actually owns the strip of land along the waterfront itself. We've also hired a lawyer who will be working with the title searcher to give the municipality advice as to our rights going forward with respect to ownership or with respect to perhaps some right of way accumulated by the public over the years. So there'll be further information with respect to that. I also wanted to say that depending on what happens at the regional council meeting on Thursday this week, July the 23rd, with respect to the report and the bylaw relative to the requirement that masks in indoor public spaces become mandatory, I may be calling a special council meeting next week. I obviously won't know until Thursday evening whether that will be necessary, but I will be asking the clerk to poll all of you to see when you are available. The likely target right now would, in order to provide adequate notice to the public of the meeting, would be Tuesday, July the 28th, but we'll have the clerk poll all of you on that. And then finally, all of you are probably aware that Niagara has moved into stage 3. I had made some reference at the last meeting to what that means in terms of gatherings indoor and gatherings outdoor, what types of facilities can be utilized by the public in larger numbers, which ones can now open. And so for all of you who want information, you could go to the Government of Ontario website or the Region of Niagara website to provide some background information. There is no addendum this evening. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Councillor Butler and then Councillor Dubineau.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have conflict of interest with number 9, consent agenda items, number 10, report PDS 33-2020, award of contract cannabis, as I am an investor in a possible cannabis farm.
Okay. Did you make reference to correspondence item 2D? Or did I miss that? Because that also relates to regulation of cannabis facilities.
Oh, I missed that completely.
I only know because I'll be declaring a conflict with respect to that.
Yeah, I'm going to declare a conflict on that one as well.
Okay, that's item 2D for the same reason, I presume.
Yes.
Councillor Dubineau.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have two this evening. I've got first one is for CAO 12-2020, the EJ Freeland Community Center Capital Improvement Funding Request, as I am a member of the Boys and Girls Club of Niagara's EJ Freeland Advisory Committee, and also for the closed session this evening for the advisory committee matter, as I have an interest with one of the parties involved.
Okay. Okay. So that's the first item on the closed session agenda.
I believe it was the second.
Oh, the litigation matter. Oh,
Yeah, the litigation matter.
okay. Are there any others? Councillor Zanko.
Thank you. Yes, I have the same conflict as Councillor Dubineau with regard to agenda item 10, CAO 12-2020, as I also sit as an advisory member on the Boys and Girls Club Committee.
Okay, are there any others? Okay, I have pecuniary interest to declare with respect to item 2D in the consent agenda relative to the cannabis facilities proposals from the city of Welland. Also by PDS 33-2020, item 10, the cannabis study, both of those because I represent a client who operates a cannabis facility and is contemplating constructing another. And also bylaw 68-2020 relative to George Pearzader, who is a client of our law firm. So I will be asking Councillor Luberts, who is the acting mayor, to assume the chair during those items. If there are no others, then I'll move to notices of upcoming public meetings and the continuation of this Town Line Road application. I understand that, Madam Clerk, that we're targeting perhaps September the 2nd with respect to that hearing, that public
That's
hearing.
correct. That's what we're targeting.
Thank you. There is no regional council report in the absence of Councillor Encina. There are no presentations or delegations. That takes us to the consent agenda items. And Councillor Luberts, you have the resolution with respect to that.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and seconded by Councilor McDermott. That council approves the consent agenda items as recommended, save and except for items 2D.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Noyes. You're on mute. You have to unmute.
On 9, under consent agenda, item number 2C, receive and support City of Sarnia, urging the Premier of Ontario. Although I'm in support of that, I'm just wondering that their preamble basically says that due to the deplorable conditions exposed by the pandemic in long-term care homes in the province, it almost sounds like they're including all of the long-term care homes. And there are many long-term care homes that are run very well and providing excellent care. And that leaves me with the feeling that we're saying that they're inferring that all long-term care homes in the province are in deplorable condition. I don't know whether, I guess we can't change it because it's Sarnia's.
Their resolution. We would either support it or not support it, but you've made comments relative to your concerns about the fact that it's not all long-term care homes. I think we can all agree on that. So that's now a matter of record.
Okay, then that's fine. I just wanted to make sure they realize that we have some very, very good long-term care homes here in Fort Erie. And I, as a therapist, have probably gone into every single one in the Niagara region at one point in the last 40 years. And, you know, there are a lot of very good ones.
Correct. Thank you. Did you have any other items that you wanted to question, Councillor Noyes?
Nothing else. Thank you.
Okay, then I'm going to go to Councillor Butler and then Councillor Luberts. You have to unmute, Councillor Butler.
Sorry, I was unmuted. I apologize. I'd like to talk about 2B, the minutes from the Fort Erie SPCA, and make a few comments. I see that in the month of May, they talked about having 45 animal control issues handled with 30 animal control complaints and a breakdown of other categories. And the same thing was discussed in July. I'm just wondering, can we get a proper breakdown on a continual basis of what those issues are with a report speaking about the status prior to the current status and then the possible future outcome of those animals that are in their control?
So I would imagine that this is information that goes from month to month. Are you looking
Right.
for more specific information or?
Yeah, I mean, we're paying $150,000, if I'm not mistaken, for them to cover the contract, and that falls under our purview. I would think that we would be able to get access to those kinds of reports so that we know what exactly is being handled, how it's being handled, and what they're planning to do on a go-forward basis.
Mr. Cookett, is that something that you could pursue with the SPCA?
Through your mayor to the councillor, absolutely. I'll reach out to the manager and get additional information, detailed information that is provided monthly with their minutes.
Okay. Also, thank you, Mr. Cookett. Also, every single member of council received several emails, phone calls, and I've received messages regarding complaints and very disturbing allegations regarding a variety of situations with respect to the care and control of the animals within the SPCA reach. And I know that there were a couple of us that asked some very tough questions and have been working with the CAO to get those answers. And I do not see any mention of any of those complaints or inquiries from the members of public in the minutes of the meetings, nor do I see any internal investigations or the outcomes of those investigations or allegations. And I'm wondering if we could get a report for that as well.
Councillor Butler, near the end of the minutes, there's a reference to a report from Animal Welfare Inspection, and I believe Mr. Cookett has some information relative to that, the background of that.
Correct. Through your worship to the councillor, why don't I just give you a brief? We all did receive those complaints, myself included, and the councillors. I did look into them, and I did catch wind that investor did come down from pause and go through the building and do an investigation. I have reached out to both the ACRB, which is the organization that reviews any hearings or hears the hearings in event that there is an investigation that is appealed, the direction from pause appealed. They have not received anything from the Fort Erie SPCA according to their email response. I did reach out to pause, and I had a few questions for them. Have they done any investigations recently? Have they done investigations in the past? What is the results of those investigations? I had sent that out to them a few weeks ago, and I did get a response today that they did receive it, and they're looking into what they can provide to me. I think they're probably seeking legal advice. I did explain to them that we do provide funding to the SPCA, a third of their budget. So we have an invested interest. So I'm waiting to hear back, and I'll be happy to share that once I receive it. So I haven't taken the complaints lightly. I am looking into it, and we'll continue to pressure them to get that information.
Yes, and I applaud your efforts because you have been working diligently to get those answers for us. So thank you very much. I do see that an inspector from Animal Welfare inspected the premise, and I'm happy to see that there's going to be some changes with respect to the way the SPCA has been handling euthanizing animals there. And I'm just surmising that the employees were either uncomfortable or not trained properly, and that a vet will now be contributing to that training. But I am surprised because I did some research with the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association, and I'm very surprised that a veterinarian is not responsible for assessing and carrying out that unfortunate process when it is highly recommended for a vet to do that because there's so many factors that come into play. To me, it's unimaginable that an individual who does not have the educational background with respect to being tasked with euthanization is allowed to do that. So I'm wondering if we can find out a little bit more about that and why that process is.
Mr. Cookett, I'm sure you could follow that up.
I will definitely look into that and get a response to you.
Okay. And just a few more things. I also see that the board of directors are making some policy changes on how complaints are going to be handled on a go-forward basis, where they're now going to be able to access emails, which I think is a wonderful idea. But because we're contributing a third of their revenue, I think it's important for us to be apprised of those complaints too, and find out what the investigation and the resolutions are going to be as a direct result of those complaints, so that we can always be in that loop. So I'm hoping that you can also talk to them about that, because I believe that we have a responsibility to conduct our own investigation pending the outcome of theirs if it's not satisfactory to us.
Mr. Cookett?
Also, sorry.
Before you go on, Councillor Butler, Mr.
Sure.
Cookett,
No,
you'll
that's a-
raise that as well?
Yeah, and I think that's a very good idea, and I think that should be part of the minutes submitted to council, so
Mhm.
that we're aware of the complaints and how those complaints were addressed. And I think that should be part of the monthly submission that we receive.
Okay,
Thank you,
awesome.
Councillor. Go ahead.
And further to that, I did take a look at the current contract, and I see a lot of problems with the contract, that it's not very definitive. It doesn't have a lot of systems in place to measure the deliverables. And so I don't see where we have the capabilities of conducting an audit for physical inspection of the facilities, to ensure that policies and procedures are in place, or the due diligence has been handled. Have we ever looked at their health and safety policies and their training logs to ensure that the individuals have been trained properly? And what does that look like? So I'm wondering then if we can get a copy of their health and safety and assorted compliance that comes along with that, so that we can be aware of exactly where they stand. Also, can we find out when was the last time that we visited to conduct an audit? And
Well, I'm sure Mr. Cookett can look into both of those.
Yeah.
great. And I'm just also further to that, wondering if the amount of money that we are offering the SPCA is actually a realistic amount to cover the cost of handling the program. And so I'm wondering if we could have staff look into it and find out what the other communities are doing and what the cost associated with handling it is, and whether or not we're competitive in the marketplace. So it seems to me that it would be really unfair to offer a contract to an entity that doesn't pay its value. And on the other hand, I think we really have to look at the contract, because we're not getting what we need, and the contract is too broad and open for us to be able to get what we need. So I think what I'm going to do later under notice of motion is bring up a few motions and directives with respect to animal welfare, animal rights, updating bylaws, and devising a brand new contract with respect to that.
Your alternative is also to raise this in corporate services to maybe get a better definition of what the areas of the contract are that you believe need to be strengthened or altered. But that's up to you. Anything further, Councillor Butler?
No, that's it.
Okay.
My apologies for interrupting, Your Worship. I just need to raise a quick point of order. I realized just now I can't vote on this SPCA minutes because the company I work for actually just recently did a contract from them, and I'd rather declare it now and not vote rather than make the mistake after. And I apologize tremendously. I was looking at the minutes, realizing that there was something else. So
Yeah, that's item 2B.
Yeah, I asked for your guidance on how to do this. Should we?
You just did it.
Okay.
You declared. So what we will do, we're going to separate 2B. We'll vote on that separately, provided Councillor Luberts and your seconder are in agreement.
Yeah.
Item 2B, Councillor Luberts,
Yeah.
and your seconder was
Councillor McDermott.
Councillor McDermott. You're agreeable to that? I didn't hear you, but I think you said yes. Yeah. Okay. So we'll just deal with that separately, Councillor Dubineau. Did you have anything further, Councillor Butler?
No, I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Councillor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Just to follow up on Councillor Butler's inquiries. I'm hoping that when our CAO looks into the request, that we consider sticking with the contract that we have, because I'm hearing that Mr. Cookett says that we provide the SPCA with funding. Well, we provide the SPCA with a contract and they fulfill that contract. I don't know that's funding. It's a contract that they sign and we sign for animal control. And animal welfare outside of our animal control bylaw is handled by the province. And there are organizations that do those investigations. So I hope that Mr. Cookett stays within our contract that we have with the SPCA under animal control. And I would encourage also, because I did speak with Mr. Cookett previously to this, and there are some acts that that I provided Mr. Cookett that deal with how animals are dealt with by the pound keeper of a municipality. And those acts, the town of Fort Erie has recognized, and they understand that the SPCA is going to follow those acts. And some of those acts are the exactly what people are complaining about. So if somebody wants to change the act as far as your pound keepers acts and stuff and how animals are handled, then you know, that's another story, but we're going well over and above the contract that the SPCA has regarding animal control. So I hope we stay within that, the confines of our contract. And if there's problems outside of that contract, there's ministries and departments provincially that handle those complaints.
Anything further, Councillor Luberts?
No,
Any other questions of the consent agenda items that are in the package? If not, I'll call the question on the consent agenda items except for 2B and D. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor, so then we're going to vote now on item 2B, which is the one that Councillor Dubenau has a conflict on. All those in favor of item 2B? Opposed? Okay, so you're all in favor? Let me see. If you're in favor, put your hand up. Okay, none opposed, that's carried. So Councillor Luberts, you've removed item 2D, with which I have a conflict. So I'd like to hand the chair to you and maybe you could get someone else to then move and second that item.
yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. The consent agenda item 2D, right?
Yes,
Yes, do I have a mover? Councillor Zanko, seconder. Councillor Noyes. So item 2D is now on the floor. Any comments or questions? Being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. I'll hand the chair back to you, Mayor Redekop.
thank you very much, Councillor Luberts. That then takes us to reports. And the first report is CAO 12-2020. And Councillor Butler, I understand you have the resolution for that report.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Noyes. CAO 12-2020 EJ Freeland Community Center Capital Improvement Funding Request that Council amends the 2020 capital budget to include the rehabilitation and renovations required at the EJ Freeland Community Center EFC C20 by $70,000 from the Facilities Maintenance Reserve for capital improvements to the town-owned building, and further, that council amends the 2020 operating budget by a reduction of $30,000 for fundraising expenses and directs staff to transfer the $30,000 to the general levy rate stabilization reserve.
Are there any questions or comments? Councillor McDermott.
Yes, Your Worship. Um, I find this is a very untimely request, especially being in a COVID emergency. My thing is, this could be precedent setting along the lines down the road when we have the more problems we're going to have in the future with regards to groups not being able to have bingos because the borders are closed. It's going to be a big crapshoot out there for people coming to us looking for municipal money. This is going to set a precedent to that. And, I don't know why this wasn't included at the beginning when the committee was putting these things together, because quite frankly, I know that being corporate services chair, I'm going to be tasked to do budgets for the next 2 years that are going to have to be cared for in a very reasonable manner because we don't know what's coming forward. So I want to do everything to help the Boys and Girls Club, and I fully support the efforts that they've made to bring us back in the fold with regards to exercising and enjoying the gym and enjoying the pool. But this is a big ask for the time that we're living in. And under these circumstances, I cannot support this tonight.
Cook, do you have any comments with respect to this other than the fact that we're the owner of the facility itself and this is something that arose really because of the COVID-19 matters?
Yeah, through your worship to the councillor, I agree. These are interesting times, and if we weren't in a pandemic, they would have started the capital program long ago and raised the money for this. Unfortunately, now it's not a good time to be raising money, but they've got capital improvements that have to be made so that they can open the daycare facility. And once that happens, they will start to generate some revenue. Keep in mind, as the mayor noted there, that this is our building. These are improvements being made to our capital facility. And I did look at the work that is going to take place for the $210,000 and the detailed list of that. Some of those items actually fall under our responsibility under the lease agreement. So that's why I supported this, because some of these items, again, are things that we would have had to take care of in the future at some point. We're just advancing those improvements at this point.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that, Your Worship. I understand that, but I don't, was the daycare center in the agreement, the lease agreement that we signed?
The daycare facility wasn't being operated and there was an understanding that it would have to be renovated in order to become operational. It's one of the facilities that actually will provide funding to assist in offsetting costs throughout the rest of the operation. So that this is, yes, we're being asked to put in an extra 70,000, but it looks like according to the recommendations, 30 of this was money that we would have spent on something else. Is that correct, Mr. Cookett?
You're absolutely correct. We had budgeted in this year's for 30,000 for fundraising efforts. Initially, we were going to have our advisory committee do the fundraising efforts for capital improvements, and we needed some money to receive money.
You're going to need to sit closer to your microphone. We're having difficulty hearing you.
Is that better?
Much better.
Yes, so those monies, we did allocate 30,000 for fundraising efforts this year, which we were going to be responsible for. The Boys and Girls Club now have taken on that responsibility. They're going to do all the fundraising efforts for the capital improvement. So those money, that 30,000 can go back into our reserves, our budget. So the difference is really 40,000.
Okay, we're still having trouble with your, we're having trouble with your microphone, Mr. Cookett.
I think what I'm going to do is switch rooms.
Well, that's fine as long as we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, so
You want me to do that now, or?
why don't you wait, because we're going to be changing chairs in a moment because I've got a conflict with respect to the next report. Did you have anything further, Councillor McDermott?
Yes, I did. I guess my point is we have many different spots for daycare centers in our community as well, such as the Native Center, which went through a big expansion. We don't really have anything in what we have today telling us that there is a huge need for spaces in the community, because obviously at this point there is not. So
That's not correct, Councillor McDermott. The
Oh,
last
okay.
stat we had earlier this year was that there was, I don't know, something like 500 spaces. Now, some of that may have been taken up by the expansion of the Native Friendship Center daycare, but there would still be a significant number of children looking for daycare spaces.
well, I'd be interested in hearing those facts. But under the circumstances, Your Worship, there are going to be many groups that are going to come to us in the very near future. You know it and I know it. Come September, when the CERB is over, things are going to start getting a little bit tougher if people aren't getting back to work in time. And we're going to have lineups here. And they're going to say to us, you give $70,000 to the Boys and Girls Club. How are you going to help us? And some of these groups that might come to us are very fragile groups that might actually need our help. And I just can't vote for this at this time, because I believe it does set a precedent. As much as I would like to help, and I really would, but this, I lost sleep over the last couple of nights, because I know what I've got to look forward to, and I have to look forward to the worst possible scenarios that might come forward, or else I'm not doing my job as a corporate service chair. So that's my belief, and I'm more than welcome to hear everybody else's. Thank you.
That's fine. I think we can't lose sight of the fact that these are leasehold improvements to a facility that we own, and it's a 1-for-3 investment. We put up $1, they put up $2 for a total of $3. Councillor Butler and then Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Your Worship. But I'm just wondering, isn't construction already done? Like, I thought we were supposed to have all the construction done so that they were ready to move and open up in May. I know that COVID probably pushed some of that back, but I thought it was completely renovated anyway. And
Mr. Cookett?
yeah, sorry.
Sorry, through your worship to the councillor, those upgrades or those capital improvements are taking place currently. So they are working on them right now.
Oh, okay, I thought that for some reason they had been completed, but when the Y had the facility, it seems to me, because my son went to daycare there, that the daycare was still, that the facility part in the back was still good, no?
So you recall that it was closed in 2014, I believe, and had been really left unattended. It really wasn't suitable for a daycare facility operation now, hence the need for the renovations.
Okay, so, you know, was this something that they had decided about doing just recently? Because I don't remember it ever coming up in negotiations or for consideration at budget time either. Do you not think that this should be postponed until budget time? I kind of agree with Councillor McDermott that the timing is really bad, because we don't know about the second wave or even a third wave for the virus. And what if we have constituents out in the marketplace that need more assistance? Where are we going to capitalize or get that capital to be able to help them as well? Is it something that we really need to expend right now, or can it wait?
We historically don't provide funding to many nonprofit groups historically, but Mr. Cookett, to respond to the question of timing, this is your report.
Yeah, so they need to get these capital improvements done so it meets code or specifications so that they can run a daycare. They want to get the daycare up and running in August and start generating revenues. Their business plan always showed that, I'll get a little closer, always showed that it was the daycare that was going to provide the revenue to help operate the facility, the pool, and all the other amenities. So the daycare is very, very important.
Okay, so
I'm hoping you're hearing that.
Well, we heard part of it.
yeah, exactly, part of it. So what I'm gathering, I'm just kind of surmising here that in order for them to be able to be profitable somewhat or break even, they need this portion of their business plan to be successful, and we need to contribute to it in order to do that.
And you'll recall that their business plan indicated that it would be difficult for them to run a break-even operation in any event, so that they would have to do some extraordinary things. And you're quite correct. They don't have a flow of income from daycare that would hamper the ability for them to provide other programs in the balance of the facility. So you're quite correct.
Okay, and then to Councillor, this is my last question, to Councillor McDermott's point though, you know, I mean, the Ridgeway Lions Club, for example, has come to us for assistance, and we own that property too. Why that property and not, why this property and not that property?
Well, that property,
That would be a question that they're raising, right?
no, in fact, that question was raised a couple of years ago, and Mr. Cookett, you can comment on that, because we just approved a new agreement, which I declared a conflict on, because I'm a Ridgeway Lions member. But Mr. Cookett, can you comment on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
through your worship to the councillor, we did actually change our agreement with them in that facility, and we took on a large portion of the responsibilities of the capital improvements that they previously were responsible for. So we have done the same for them as what we were doing here. We're picking up those additional costs. We know these not-for-profits don't have a lot of cash flow right now. Bingo money is not there. The other thing I would just like to note with the EJ Freeland is they haven't been able to open, and they would have been generating revenues up to this point. Right now, it's only costing them money. They've had to pay the utility costs during this period. So they're not generating any revenue. They only have expenses up to this point. And I think the expenses that are going towards the utility to pick up a lot of that would have been helpful for the capital improvements that they wanted to take place.
Anything further, Councillor Butler?
No, thank you.
Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Just to add to that, I think I mentioned in the last two meetings that I am concerned about the charities and the lack of ability for the bingos and lack of fundraising opportunities that they've had to run their programs. And this particular, the Boys and Girls Club being one of them. I do understand that the Gaming Corporation, once we moved into stage 3, is supposed to be coming up with some kind of a plan or some suggestions, I guess, some options for the various charities and non-for-profit organizations. And I think that should happen sooner than later. The other comment I wanted to make is that I haven't yet seen, and I've looked for it, and I may have missed it because we've been inundated with different information from the province and the feds. I haven't seen anything specific to assist the charities in any real sense. It's usually, you know, not-for-profit, or if it's another type of business, but it doesn't seem to fit the charitable program, of course. Maybe it's still something that's on the board back there. And regarding the renovations, it may have been beneficial that the renovations did not happen earlier, because I wonder if there's been any changes in the requirements and the physical setup of the daycare centers now with the COVID-19. I'm wondering if that's going to affect the renovations, as the requirements may have changed in the last few months.
Mr. Cook, would you have any knowledge with respect to that?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, you make a very good point, and they did have to add some capital improvements to address the needs of the COVID-19 and the pandemic. So they've had to make changes to the washroom, kitchen facilities, and so forth because of that. So there is additional costs. Unfortunately, they're addressing them now while they're doing those works. I think to Councillor Butler's earlier comment, I think they're almost done those renovations. I know they had started a while ago because they do want to get it open in August.
Anything further, Councillor Noyes?
Nothing further, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Luberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. I guess my question would be to Mr. Cookett, if we don't do these renovations, are you saying that the Boys and Girls Club won't be able to open in August? That's number one. And then when it is time for them to open, they're going to be under construction, then they won't be able to open again because they're under construction. So are we not doing this renovation so that when they're ready to go in and work, everything will be ready for them?
Mr. Cookett?
To your worship, to the councillor, as stated earlier, those renovations are taking place right now. The Boys and Girls Club are front-ending all the costs to do those works. They will begin their capital improvement or their capital program shortly to start raising funds, and they're hoping to get most of those monies back. But this isn't a good time to be fundraising. So they've reached out to us. I've looked at the list of requirements, and as stated, some of the work taking place are within our responsibility under the lease agreement, exit doors and so forth. So we would have had to pick up some of these costs regardless.
Councillor Luberts?
So what you're asking for is the $70,000 to do what we normally would have done. We're already under construction, so we budgeted for that construction, and there's an overrun of 70,000, or it's the Boys and Girls Club don't have the funding on their end.
Yeah, so what Mr. Cookett was
Are they
saying
going to
is,
come back with the money on their end later?
Mr. Cookett, perhaps you can respond to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm clear on his question, but
Well, I think the question, so just to be clear, the town doesn't have to pick up $70,000 worth of renovations. Some of these renovations, Mr. Cookett has indicated, would be our responsibility under the agreement. I think that's what you said.
absolutely,
Is that correct?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And 30,000 of the 70 that we're being asked to approve tonight was budgeted under a different item relative to fundraising for this. So that it's really 40,000 less whatever we would be obligated to pay for in any event. That's where we are. But the balance would have been, is the cost of the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, and are the Boys and Girls Club going to pick up that balance later when they have an opportunity to fundraise?
Well, of the $210,000 for this project, 70,000 they have marked as fundraising. 70,000 they're taking out of their own capital reserves, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Mr. Cookett is shaking his head. So they're going to try to raise $70,000 with a fundraising campaign.
And we're going to give them 70,000.
Well, if this report is approved.
Correct.
All right.
Anything further, Councillor Luberts?
No, I'm good.
Anything further, anyone else? Councillor McDermott.
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Yeah, at the bottom of the report, it says that if we don't come up with the 70,000, that it may jeopardize the operating agreement entered into with the Boys and Girls Club. Now, if this program wasn't in that agreement, how would that actually really be?
Well, Mr. Cookett, again, it's your report. I have an answer, but why don't you answer it?
The capital improvements are $210,000. And some of those works are our works, and they are taking from their reserves to complete the works right now. Which are underway and hopefully be done shortly, if not already. They're asking us to make a contribution of 70. Some of the works which would have been our responsibility, and some are saying, will you make a donation or help us with those capital improvements? Because it is your building, it is your facility. So once they do the capital fundraising, they will be able to replenish their reserve for their Lewis Street address or other locations. I don't know if that answers your question.
Councillor McDermott?
Well, you tried.
Thank you.
Well, ask for clarification if it's not what you were looking for.
Well, we come into an agreement, a lease agreement with the Boys and Girls Club. And this item is not in that agreement, or it wouldn't be before us today. So my question basically says, how can we jeopardize the operating agreement entered into with the Boys and Girls Club if that item wasn't in there?
Well, because they had a budget, they put together a business plan and they put together a budget as to how they could cover the costs that they were going to be incurring. Part of their business plan included operating a daycare facility. And the revenues generated from that daycare facility would help to offset costs they would incur as a result of the other programs that they offered in the balance of the facility. If they can't make money, there are provisions in the agreement that would allow them to terminate the agreement. So to some extent, this assists them to continue to provide, or at least to provide the service that we're hoping that they will provide. And as Mr. Cookett has indicated, they have another operation in Fort Erie as well that they've committed to try to keep open. And again, this is all dependent upon the revenues that they have available to them from the community. So that's, I don't know if that answers your question, Councilor McDermott.
Well, Your Worship, I just find it a little bit strange, this whole thing. And it might pass tonight, but at least I'm going to be able to sleep better because, like I said, I think we're going to be in for a lot of interesting times over the next number of months. And I just don't ever want to have to explain why we put out $70,000 to a not-for-profit and then look people in the eye and say, well, you know, no, we can't help you. So I just want to remain consistent through this period of time because it is an emergency. And, you know, people are expecting us to come up with a budget that's going to suit them and the circumstances that they're in. So it's not that I'm against this at all. I'm just against the fact that it's coming up tonight because I believe us being in this situation and having to explain this to others down the line, to me, it's a no-brainer. I don't know why we're considering this tonight, as much as I hate to do it, but I have to vote against it just to rest at night for the things that are to come. And, you know, there might be a lot in the sequence of priorities. There might be 5 or 6 priorities that come to us that are really going to need that help, and we're not going to be able to provide it. And that I will be awfully sad about. I'm finished with it, Your Worship.
Mr. Cookett.
Yeah, I just want to make one other point here is their capital program initially is for $70,000, but it's not going to stop there. They're going to continue to fundraise for the improvements that building requires. Some of the improvements in that capital program would be monies that we would have had to spend in the future on improvements. They are going to raise those money, hopefully, to offset those costs or pay for those improvements, which people might have to in the future if their capital funding program is such. You know what? I would think in the long term we will end up getting this money back.
You're going to have to repeat that last bit because we can't hear you, Mr. Cookett.
So I'm thinking in the long term with their capital funding campaign, they're going to be paying for capital improvements that we would have had to in the future.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments? Then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the report recommendations? Opposed? I vote in favor, so it carries 3-2. That takes us then to item PDS 33-2020, for which I have a conflict, and I would ask Councillor Luberts to assume the chair for that, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. That brings us to PDS 33-2020, award of consulting services for the town of Fort Erie cannabis legislation policy study. Do I have a mover? Councillor Noyes, second by Councillor Dubenau. That report is now on the floor. Any comments or questions? Councillor Noyes.
I think it's important, after I was reviewing the staff report, that things have changed in the cannabis industry and that we really do need to get our rules and regulations in sync with the province and the feds, and also express our opinion in regards to what we would like to see happen in Fort Erie and what regulations and guidelines we'll have. I noticed that we received something, I think, from Welland earlier today, if I'm not mistaken, was earlier on our agenda. And there's, it's an industry that's growing, but we have to control the growth and we have to make sure it's done the right way. So I think this study will help us determine that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councilor McDermott?
Yes, Councilor Rivers. I'm going to be just voting against this based in general that I believe that throughout Ontario, there's been so many cannabis bylaws and policies set forward that, you know, each time you have a study, you have to do a study on things that cost you $61,000, anywhere from $61,000 to $100,000. And I'm not certain why we're not working with other municipalities when we have things like this of interest in every community, why we're not working together and making it a lot cheaper for these things to be done. So I'll be voting no, just on principle, not because of the selection.
Thank you, Councilor McDermott. Any other comments or questions? Councilor Zanko?
Thank you, Councilor Lubert. I'm actually very happy to see this report moving forward. I did bring this request forward. Just as a reminder, when we asked for this study to be done, it was because there was a lot of loose policy and there was a lot of cannabis businesses and facilities that were trying to come to the area. So that's where this study was requested from. I'm happy to see that we're at the stages of awarding this contract, and I will be supporting this, as I thought at that time the majority of council also did support this study.
Thank you, Councilor Zanko. Anything further? Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Our report carries. I'll turn the chair back over to you, Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hubert. That then takes us to report IS 26-2020. That was moved at our last council meeting by Councillor Noyes. And so it's on the floor for further questions or comments. But one of the things I think that we were anticipating was some information from staff as to why the recommendation was for the budgeted amount as opposed to the amount that the contractor had tendered to do all the work that was in the bid, in the tender. So Mr. Cookett, maybe you can provide us with some background information unless you're in transit. You were in transit.
Yes, hopefully this is better and you can hear me now.
Well, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, and Mr. Most may want to jump in here as well. This is, I would suggest or recommend we stick with the original budgeted amount. On this particular contract, we had one bidder. We didn't get a good competition, and I would think, and I haven't looked at the unit prices, but I would think the unit prices are probably a little bit higher than normal. Kelly could probably comment on that. And I think we can do a sufficient job with our roads with the budget we've allocated. So I don't know if Mr. Walsh would like to add or not.
Walsh?
Well, as Tom says, there is only one bidder on this. The unit prices were higher than we've experienced over the past couple of years. That doesn't mean they're necessarily out of line. Every once in a while, every few years, you seem to see a large jump in prices and then a steady state for a few years. So I'm not suggesting they're out of line, but typically, as this is an operating job and not a capital job, we work within our budget limits. If this were a capital job, we would draw from the reserves to complete the project, but we do have the flexibility in this. modify the work being done, the scope of work. I would like to add that the scope of work proposed, these roads have never been touched before in terms of stone shouldering. So to delay the work on those roads for one more year is not necessarily going to affect the long-term performance of the road. So my suggestion to council is award the contract as is. Our thoughts with respect to sticking with budget is due to the financial pressures on the town right now, it was best to stick to budget and not suggest an exceedance.
Are there any questions or comments arising out of that additional information? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I think I was the individual who brought it up first when it first came, that I was concerned about removing some of the roads from the budget if it was necessary that they be done, because I understand the purpose of shouldering is to help maintenance of the road and the longevity of the road. And from my understanding from Mr. Walsh, that's not going to come in question. And also from the report, it looks like they're going to be again in 2021 we'll have a better idea. The costing has gone up, and then we'll be able to increase probably, unfortunately, the 2021 budget to cover the roads that are not being done this year.
Any other councillors have any questions or comments? Councillor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. When I took a second look at this report and I'm reading the roads that we're going to do, I'm just curious. We talk about the unit prices and the total cost of shouldering. I know that it was only a few years ago that we did a resurface stone and chip on Centralia between Bethune and Dominion Road. Now here we're going to go in with equipment and do shouldering. Now, why wouldn't they have done the shouldering at the same time they did the resurfacing?
That was done last year, but Mr. Walsh, you can probably respond to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you can see by the scope of work on this, it's not insubstantial, about $100,000 of work, as it turns out. To tack that onto our service program with the same contractor, they don't have the specialized equipment that this contract does. So they would have to subcontract that out themselves. And eventually we may get a worse price in actuality, because they're going to take profit off their subcontractor. So we feel it's best to go out and do the work in the areas we see. You're correct that Centralia was done last year, but roads that are in here are maybe 1/3 life as a rule, and we're improving the performance that way. So it doesn't necessarily trail along with our paving program.
Councillor Luberts.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I'm going to call the question with respect to the report. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to new business and inquiries. And there is a resolution under new business, and Councillor Zanko, you have it, relative to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
I do need a seconder, though. I wasn't able to get a seconder.
Well, I'll go Councillor Dubenow.
Okay. Okay, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubenow. Whereas the corporation of the town of Fort Erie has entered into a strategic alliance with the local Indigenous Friendship Center, being the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center. And whereas the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center has been an active contributor to the well-being of residents in the community. And whereas the corporation of the town of Fort Erie has an excellent ongoing relationship with the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center and wishes to set a leading example in the area of Indigenous relations by highlighting overlapping community interests and undertakings. And whereas the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, and the Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centers, OFIFC, declaration of mutual commitment and friendship reflects the municipality's understanding of and working relationship with Indigenous people in the community. And whereas the local Indigenous Friendship Center is contemplating the signing of this declaration and participation in related concurrent activities during the virtual AMO conference in August of 2020. Now therefore be it resolved that the Municipal Council of the Town of Fort Erie authorizes the mayor to sign in conjunction with the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center the joint AMO-OFIFC Declaration of Mutual Commitment and Friendship on behalf of the municipality, and to participate in related concurrent activities during the AMO 2020 conference, and further that council directs staff to work with AMO in order to coordinate the declaration signing and related concurrent activities in advance of the AMO 2020 conference.
Before you vote on that, I can advise all of you that tomorrow morning I will be signing the declaration on behalf of the town of Fort Erie, presuming this passes. And Jennifer Dockstader will be signing on behalf of the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center. And that will become part of the ceremony that will be participated in at the AMO conference in August. Councillor Noyes, you had your hand up?
No,
Councillor Dubinow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just briefly, I had the opportunity to attend an Indigenous cultural competency session at AMO last year. And during that session, they actually highlighted the relationship between the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center and the town of Fort Erie, and how it's an example that is used within other municipalities that have friendship centers. And I think this is fantastic. I'm going to support it. I just wanted to mention that we have a good relationship, and I enjoy seeing that this relationship move further along and grow even further. So just a quick comment, Your Worship.
Right, and it's important, and I think we're one of the few municipalities that actually has representation from the Indigenous community on some of our municipal committees, whether they're advisory committees or even something like the Land Committee, which is made up primarily of staff, but it provides us with an insight that we wouldn't otherwise have. Were there any other questions or comments? There being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the resolution? None opposed, that is carried. There is a second resolution under new business, and that is Councillor Butler.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that council appoints Karen Arbor to the Ridgeway Business Improvement Area Board of Management for the period ending November 14th, 2022.
Questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Are there any items, any inquiries, or items of new business from members of council? Councillor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. I got a call about the development on Schooley Road area, Schooley and Rebstock Road. And the gentleman and his wife on Rebstock are wondering if the developer will be in doing some noxious weed cutting in the field. It seemed like he abandoned the property, and they're just wondering if we're still continuing with cutting weeds in the field.
Ms. Hanson, would you have any knowledge with respect to that? Ms. Hanson?
Yep, I just unmuted. I'm not from, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. I'm not familiar with that, but I will inquire with the director and with bylaw enforcement tomorrow.
Thank you.
We'll follow up with Councillor Luberts.
You let all councillors know.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Luberts?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Hanson. And to further, I had, I think you know the lady I'm talking about. We're inquiring about some of the trees down at Bay Beach, and the trees that the Friends of Crystal Beach had donated money towards. And she was just wondering, why is it that I think there was 3 elm trees that don't have water bags on them, but the other trees do. And they're curious as to why those trees wouldn't be getting watered, because one does look like it's struggling.
So is that you, Ms. Hanson, or is that Mr. Walsh?
I can start off. When we performed our 1-year warranty inspection at Bay Beach earlier this year, we did identify that there were 2 of the large spaded trees that suffered a little bit through the winter, and they have been flagged, and we have been watering them. I don't know why they don't have the water bag on them. Perhaps they are taking special care with the watering on those trees that the watering bag wouldn't permit. I will look into that. Those trees are under warranty, and we have reached out to the contractor that planted them originally as well. So we are watching them and we are watering them.
Councilor Lubberts?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. And just out of curiosity, with the warranty that the contractor provided for the trees, is it his responsibility to do the watering, or is that the town doing the watering?
As soon as we took over this site, it became the town's responsibility to water, not his.
So
But
we're
there is,
doing that
I
now?
believe, a 2-year warranty on the trees.
And so we're responsible for the watering now?
That is correct, yes.
And are we watering properly to cover the
I
warranty?
understand. Yeah, I understand that we are watering on a regular basis.
And just to relieve everybody's curiosity, since we've reported this to the contractor, if the trees do fail in the next year, they are still going to be covered under warranty because we've reported it before the warranty period is over?
That
2-year
would be
warranty.
that would be my understanding.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Did I see another hand up for new business or inquiries? If not, then we'll go to motions. Councilor Zanko, you have a motion.
Yes, thank you. I need a mover for this motion as well. Your worship.
You're the mover. You need a seconder.
Or sorry, a seconder.
Councilor Noyes?
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Noyes, that council reconsider recommendation number 18, which was approved at the council and committee meeting held on March 9, 2020, which reads as follows: that bylaw number 36-2016 is amended under section 7, disclosures of pecuniary interest, section 7.1, general, by adding subsection G, council members who declare a conflict of interest shall remove themselves from the council chambers before discussions being on the conflict of interest topic and shall return when the discussions on the topic of interest is completed.
Madam Clerk, can you just clarify for us the procedure on this? So we vote on this motion. What happens next?
Okay, so you vote on the motion to reconsider. If that carries, then you reconsider and you vote on whether or not to defeat that motion that was
Or approve it? Okay.
March.
Everybody clear on that?
Mhm.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to reconsider? Opposed? That is carried. So that means that we're now going to reconsider. And Madam Clerk, do we need a mover for that? Does Councilor Zanko move that, or is it implicit in her motion?
I believe it would be implicit in her motion that it would be herself and her seconder.
Councilor Noyes. So the resolution now, excuse me. The resolution on the floor is that bylaw number 36, 2016 as amended, et cetera. Maybe Councilor Zanko, you can read that bylaw number, whatever, just to make it clear what we're going to be voting on, yes or no.
Bylaw number 36-2016.
Yes. Continue on. If you would read that whole.
Sure.
So it's clear
That
that it's-
bylaw number 36-2016 is amended under section 7, disclosures of pecuniary interest, section 7.1, general, by adding subsection G, council members who declare a conflict of interest shall remove themselves from the council chambers before discussions begin on the conflict of interest topic and shall return when the discussions on the topic of interest is completed.
Okay, is there any further discussion with respect to that motion? Councillor Zanko?
I just wanted to comment as to why I'm bringing this back, if that's okay. I know initially I did support this recommendation, but the more I thought of it, I just thought it would be really disruptive, especially when we're back in council chambers. I know sometimes our meetings last for hours. I think it would add a lot of additional time frames to our meetings, and that was another reason why I did bring this back.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this? Councillor Dubenow and then Councillor Noyes.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm good with either way that this goes. It's just during the course of the discussion for the reconsideration and leading up to this, I did a little bit of investigation, and apparently this is not unheard of. I think Welland and a few other municipalities in Niagara have a similar policy in place where anytime there's a closed session, the councillor in question has to either leave the room completely or at least step down from their seat to, distance themselves from it. So, I mean, if it's the will of council that they want to reconsider and defeat this, I'm fine with that. I'm going to vote in favor of the bylaw just in light of the information that I had, but I'm good either way. I just wanted to offer that up for consideration by members of council. That's all.
Just to be clear, you mentioned that in closed session,
Sorry,
anyone who
my
has a conflict
apologies.
has to leave.
Yes, exactly. I didn't mean closed session. I meant an open session vote. But
Right.
My apologies, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Again, I think that what we did before was fine. I think people who declared a conflict behaved themselves appropriately, and you still have the choice to remove yourself if you feel that way inclined. But again, I think it adds to the confusion and becomes very cumbersome when you have 3 of the 7 council members declaring a conflict, let's say because of the gaming minutes or something like that, or going back and forth. It's like everybody's coming, everybody's going, it's back and forth. And again, you cannot discuss the issue, that doesn't change, but to remove yourself physically from the meeting, I think is a bit cumbersome and unnecessary.
Anyone else? So I'm going to call the question. If you're in favor of this process of removing yourself from the council chambers, you would vote yes. If you're opposed to that, you would vote no. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? All right. So all of those in favor of the resolution to remove yourself if you have a conflict? All of those opposed? And I'm opposed. That's defeated 4-3. Okay, that then takes us to notices of motion. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had 4 separate ones, but I think I'm going to combine them into one. Or maybe a couple. But the first notice of motion, I'll save them, and then maybe you can tell me whether or not it should just be one. But first notice of motion is the regarding new bylaws that will offer the protection and the rights of animals within the boundaries of the municipality, which would include a panel of experts to have those discussions and research. The next notice of motion would be for the current animal control bylaw to have antiquated notions be removed and amended to be reflective of animal protection and rights in line with the proposed new animal rights and protection bylaws. And the third one would be that the current spend for animal control be researched and analyzed to find out if the town of Fort Erie's allotment is competitive in the marketplace. And then the fourth one and final one would be that the current contract with the SPCA be looked at and rewritten for when the new contract comes up for renewal. So those are the 4.
Okay, so the The first one was again, what was the first one?
So the first one is, we do not have any bylaws with respect to animal rights and protection. So I'd like that to be researched and developed.
How about if you, rather than bring a notice of motion on that, were to raise that in the corporate services subcommittee meeting to try to get some background information from staff with respect to this before we get into a situation where council would be voting on it, because we'd need to get some background information regardless. Would that be agreeable to you?
Sure, if we get reports first, absolutely.
I think what you can do is you can raise it and you can ask staff and they can at least provide some background to you, and then you can perhaps better target what it is that you are hoping to accomplish with respect to this particular facet. In terms of amending the animal control bylaw and the whether the town of Fort Erie is competitive, we would have received that information, I believe, at the time we would have renewed this contract. However, we'll leave that there, but I would suggest that in the meantime, if you have a corporate services meeting, bring that up. You might be able to get that information at that time. So you've got 3 notices of motion that will be dealt with at the next regular council meeting. Is that correct?
That's great.
And that next regular council meeting is August the 24th. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Correct, your worship.
Okay. And again, if there is a corporate services subcommittee meeting between now and then, any information that you can get that would help you to refine the actual wording of your motion would be helpful, I think, to council. Mr. Cookett?
Yeah, just to be clear, so the SPCA falls under bylaw, and bylaw is under planning and development services, not under corporate. So I believe Councillor Butler, you're now on corporate services. So let's leave it with the appropriate subcommittee to deal with, and I'll have discussions internally with the directors and see if we could just leave that portion out of who's going to deal with it, but we will deal with it.
Okay, so all right, so is that satisfactory, Councillor Butler?
Sure.
I was thinking that the bylaws would be under corporate services, but that's fine. But we need to know that that's at least being discussed internally. And Mr. Cookett, you've indicated that that will take place. I don't know what the problem is, Mr. Cookett. It can't be the various computers, because we can't hear you no matter where you go.
That's all intentional.
Well, it's working. Mission accomplished. Are there any other notices of motion by any councillors? Councillor McDermott.
Yes, Your Worship. Talked to both you and Ms. Schofield today about a notice of motion that I have in the lease agreement for the pool. And I wanted to waive the rules of procedure tonight to try and get this moved through. I'm just wondering if that is going to be possible, or how shall I do this?
Right, so you spoke to me about bringing a motion this evening and asking for the rules to be waived to permit the town to renew the agreement with the underwater recovery unit with respect to the pool. Because now that we're, as I understand it, your reasoning is that now we're moving into stage 3. The pool could be open between August 4th and September the 5th for use by the public. However, there's no agreement. We'd have to have an agreement. And the clerk has indicated that we have to go through this process first, and then there would have to be the passage of a bylaw. So this is the first step. I have indicated to you that I'm prepared to entertain your notice of motion, and I understand you've written one out, and I'm prepared to allow council to consider whether we should waive the rules, primarily because we're in an emergency situation and we're in a short schedule in the summers. So I'm content to do that. So if you want to read your notice of motion, and it wouldn't be that we extend the agreement, it would be that we renew the agreement.
Okay.
Sorry, Madam Clerk wants to further refine that.
I believe that first you need to vote on whether or not you're going to waive the rules, and then he would do his motion.
I think we need to know.
Yes,
I'd like to know. I think the counselor should know what it is he's asking. So I'll let him.
Okay.
I'll let him put that. I'll let him at least tell us what he's going to ask for us to waive the rules on, so counselors aren't in the dark. Councillor
Okay,
McDermott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to waive the rules of procedure to permit a notice of motion to be introduced and debated in the same meeting. And the notice of motion is that the lease agreement between the town of Port Erie and the Port Erie Underwater Recovery Unit respecting the Kinsman Pool be extended for one additional year you want to give me the wording?
It would be renewed, not extended, but renewed.
Okay. So respecting the Kinsman Pool, it would be renewed for one additional year under the same terms and conditions.
Okay, so everyone is clear on what the request is. And so this motion is to waive the rules. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Zanko? Are there any questions or comments with respect to waiving the rules on this? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. So Councillor McDermott, please read your motion, your notice of motion, so that we can deal with it this evening.
Just 1 second. Okay, notice my motion is that the lease agreement between the town of Port Erie and the Port Erie Underwater Recovery Unit respecting the Kinsman Pool be renewed for one additional year under the same terms and conditions. May I speak to that, Your Worship?
You may. Just let me make sure that the clerk is satisfied with the wording of that.
Okay.
Although the agreement has expired, I think I can be satisfied with the renewal.
We can renew that ex post facto. Mr. Cookett, are you content with the wording of the motion?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Okay. Yes, please, Councillor McDermott.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Coming into stage 5 makes us very happy because we would like to be opening the pool between August 4th and September 5th. It will include swimming lessons and public swims. All agencies who have been involved the past 5 years are involved again and supportive of the plan. Public Health, Boys and Girls Club, and the sponsors. And the facility manager is supportive. So we didn't think we'd get to this point, Your Worship, to be quite honest with you, with COVID and all. But I think it's going to be great for the kids of Ward 1 and 2 to have the pool available to them and have swimming lessons available for the next well. It's not forever, but it's certainly something that will let those kids feel like it's summertime at the north and west ends of town. That's all.
Thank you. And for clarity, anybody that lives in town can use the pool. It's not just Ward 1. Okay.
That's correct.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I will be in favor of this. My only question is that are they going to be able to do it with such a short timeline with the new regulations and everything else that COVID-19 is demanding in regards to change rooms and bathrooms and everything else? I'm wondering if the people who are interested in this and the organizations, Councilor McDermott, that you mentioned, have sat down, looked at all the costs involved with the staffing, the over cleaning, so to speak, and the COVID-19 restrictions. Have they looked into that?
Yes, they have, and I believe they're going to have protocols in place by the time it opens. And you can be certain that they're going to make sure that those protocols are ones that are being called for.
Well, then I wish them all well, because I agree with you. I think the children and even all of us that live in Ward 1 and 2 would probably appreciate this extremely hot summer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion brought forward by Councillor McDermott? None opposed? That is carried. Are there any other notices of motion?
Mayor, I have a
I'm
question for you.
sorry. Yes.
In order to have this enforced for August the 4th, that does mean that we need a special council meeting to consider a bylaw next week.
So that means we're good now, right?
No, it means that we have to have a special
We have to
council
have one
meeting.
next
So,
week? Okay.
yeah, so why don't we, you're already going to be
Polling for the, yeah.
polling about a meeting next Tuesday. I understand that Mr. Cookett has another item that could be put on a special council meeting. So whether we deal with mandatory masks and a couple of other items or just a couple of other items, I think we can look forward to a special meeting.
Okay,
On the 24th, hopefully?
It would be the 28th of July.
28th.
We're looking at, yes.
Tuesday the 28th is what we're aiming for.
Okay, thank you.
That I think fits into your timeline,
It'd be perfect,
Councilor McDermott.
Your
Yeah.
Worship. I really
Okay.
appreciate your help tonight.
Okay, you're more than welcome. If there are no other notices of motion, then we're at closed session. And Councilor Dubenow, you declared a conflict with respect to one of these items.
Exactly, Your Worship. I was going to ask you about that, if I should still be moving this or if I should hand it off to someone else.
I think you can move that we go into closed session with respect to them. I just think that you can't come into closed session on that particular item, which
Okay.
you've declared. If I'm wrong, I will take the.
Fair enough. Does someone want to, or sorry, Your Worship, I need a seconder for this.
Seconder, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that council does now go into closed session at 7:26 p.m. to discuss the following. A, pursuant to section 239(2)C of the Municipal Act 2001, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Proposed acquisition of land, DSBN. And B, pursuant to section 239(2)E of the Municipal Act 2001, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, advisory committee matter.
Thank you. So just for clarification, we all stay in our seats as I understand it, but Mr. Davis will do some digital magic and will remove us from the council chambers and we will be in closed session. Councillor Dubenow will be with us for the first item. And then Mr. Davis, I presume that you will then remove him from the closed session while we deal with the second item. Madam Clerk.
Yes, you have on your desk the new protocol for a closed session. Before we move into the closed session, ask the members whether or not they are alone and that they're not recording.
Oh, okay. So if they're here, they've decided to hide on me, I think. Just let me look once more. Is it in one of the folders that you gave me?
No, it was right in the center of your blotter when you sat down.
There actually wasn't any. Well, okay, here we go. So the closed session council meeting protocol with respect to conflicts of interest. As always, the conflict is declared and that's been done by Councillor Dubenow. So that when we get to that stage, Councillor Dubenow, I'll ensure that you're removed from the meeting. Then you also have to complete your declaration of pecuniary interest form, which then you submit to the clerk. Yeah, so it's for the public, you need to be aware of, since we're doing an electronic closed session meeting, the member who has a conflict will be removed by staff from the electronic media, both audio and video, until that matter has been completed. And then the council will be allowed to return, because at that stage we'll be dealing with our bylaws. Is there anything further that you want me to?
Yes, so if you go down a little further, moving into closed session.
Yep. Prior to the resolution to go into closed session, the mayor will make the following statement and ask councilors to respond. Okay, so before we begin this evening, I need each member that is attending electronically to confirm that no one else is present with you and that you are not recording this portion of the meeting. So I will start with the councilors as I see them on my screen. Councilor McDermott, can you confirm that?
Yes, I can.
Councilor Luberts?
Yes.
Councilor Noyes?
I confirm I am alone and I am not recording the meeting.
Councilor Zanko? You have to unmute.
Yes, I confirm that I'm alone and I am not recording the meeting.
Councilor Dubenow?
I confirm that I am not recording the meeting, and the only one here is me and my 2 cats.
Assume neither of them can read or write.
Very good.
Counselor Butler,
I confirm I am alone and I am not recording the meeting.
is that satisfactory then, Madam Clerk, to meet your requirements?
Yes, your
Thank
worship.
you. Thank you. Okay, so I'll call the question with respect to moving into closed session. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. So now we will give Mr. Davis an opportunity to do his thing.
Welcome back.
Technology.
Okay. So we're back into the chambers. And Councillor Zanko, you have the resolution for us to rise and reconvene.
Yes, I do, but I do need a seconder, please.
Seconder, please. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that council does now rise and reconvene from closed session at 7:51 p.m. with respect to the following items: proposed acquisition of land, DSBN, that we rise with report that staff proceed as directed. And with regard to item B, advisory committee matter, that we rise without report.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor of the recommendation? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to the consideration of bylaws, and I'll remind Councillor Luberts that bylaw 68/2020 has to be removed from the package. So could you please proceed with first and second reading of the bylaw package as amended? Are there any other bylaws that anyone wishes removed from the package? Please proceed, Councillor Luberts.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and second by Councillor McDermott. That bylaw package containing bylaw 63/2020 to amend Parks and Beaches bylaw number 119-03 as amended, closed parks. 64/2020 to accept and declare lands as public highway on the south side of Walden Boulevard, 450 Garrison Road. 9310924 Canada Inc., Glenn De Silva. 65/2020 to authorize entry into a grant funding agreement for physician recruitment with Dr. Lauren Friedman. 66/2020 to authorize entry into a grant funding agreement for physician recruitment with Dr. Nazia Perzada. 67/2020 to authorize the entry into a development agreement with Douglas Allen Darvison, 5045 Mitchener Road. 69/2020 to appoint Paul Jadoba as a municipal law enforcement officer and coordinator, law enforcement for the corporation of the town of Fort Erie, and to repeal bylaw number 125-2001. 70/2020 to authorize the entry into a fire dispatch service agreement with the corporation of the town of Tilsonburg. 71/2020 to appoint Nadine Reichelt as Deputy Chief Building Officer for the corporation of the town of Fort Erie is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Those bylaws are on the floor for questions or comments. Councillor Noyes.
Yes, in regards to number 63/2020, the Parks and Beaches bylaw, in the report it says they're going to be from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Does that match the current opening and closing of the parks that we have now? I thought some of the parks closed at 9.
Madam Clerk.
No, I've researched the Parks and Beaches bylaws amended, and it is from 11 till 6. Cannot be in the park.
And that's current?
Yes.
Those are the current times? Okay, thank you.
Questions? Mr. Cook, we had a discussion about the two reports, 65 and 66, that relate to the new physicians. And in particular, the one 66 that deals with Dr. Perzada. Paragraph 1B provides for the first $15,000 payment of 3 to be made on the anniversary date. That should be the second anniversary date. Is that correct?
You are correct, and we can make that change.
All right. There was also some discussion between us about the contents of the agreements. For some reason, Dr. Perzada's agreement has a couple of additional provisions, one dealing with termination and one dealing with inability of either party to perform because of force majeure. I think that's those are advisable provisions. Any comments on that?
No, all I can say is we're trying to build to have a template that we can use for the recruitment of all doctors. So that's where we're headed. In this particular case, both doctors seek legal advice and responded and provided comments to us. Comments were not matching; they were different. I would suggest if you like, we could make the change and send it to the doctor. I think they need to have another review of it. If it's going to make changes to one of these bylaws, then I would think we would do it. Changing this to the second anniversary date, I don't think that's something that we need to circulate back, but the other comments regarding termination, I think we would need to recirculate.
Yeah, that change to paragraph 1B of Dr. Prezada's agreement is consistent with the wording of paragraph 3, which specifically provides for the first of the $15,000 payments to be made on the second anniversary date of her commencement of services. I'd also raised the issue of how these monies are being paid, but you've indicated to me that this is consistent with previous practice, and so that's satisfactory. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is, these doctors are going at 238 Birdie, and the doctors that we have recruited for that location, the funding that we have provided have gone through the same mechanism. It's gone to the 38 and not to the doctor to cover operating costs. So we followed that template. I would suggest we not change that at this time.
Right, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments about any of the bylaws in the package? If not, Councillor McDermott, could you proceed with third and final reading of the bylaw package as amended, please?
That's leaving out 68-2020, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yes, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler. That bylaw 63-2020, 64-2020, 65-2020, 66-2020, 67-2020, 69-2020, 70-2020, 71-2020 are given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. So Councillor Lubberts, I would ask you to take the chair to deal with bylaw 68-2020. And I understand you'll have to have a mover and seconder for that, since you were the mover of the initial bylaw package. I'm handing the chair to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Madam Clerk, do I need someone to read it, or can I read it and ask for someone to move it? You're muted.
Since you have it in front of you, I would suggest that you read it and then ask for a mover and a seconder.
Okay, that brings bylaw number 68-2020 to amend zoning bylaw number 12990 at 986 Ridge Road North, George Perizader, owner. Do I have a mover?
So moved.
Councillor McDermott, and second, Councillor Zanko. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. Mayor Redekop, will hand the chair back to you.
You didn't do third and
Oh,
final.
no, we got to do third and final reading.
Right.
I have third and final reading, Your Worship.
Councillor McDermott,
Yes, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler. That bylaws 68-2020 are given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and clerk under the corporate seal.
any comments or questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. Now I'll hand the chair back to you, Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lubberts. That then takes us to scheduling of meetings. Any meetings, Councillor Zanko?
Yes, we have a Planning and Development Services Subcommittee meeting on August the 5th at 5 p.m. And that will be held virtually, I believe.
So, sorry, Madam Clerk.
Mayor, we have to do first and second and third and final for 72-2020 to confirm the actions of council.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. I'm just, thank you for keeping on schedule, but I'm at scheduling of meetings right now. I'll get back to that. Are there any other meetings, Councillor Noyes?
Yes, there's an infrastructure business subcommittee meeting next Wednesday, July 29th at 3 p.m. That will be a Zoom meeting, and also on July 23rd, this Wednesday at 9 a.m. the 40 non-for-profit housing will start at 9 a.m. and I think it's going to be a telephone Zoom.
It's actually a Thursday.
Well, then it would be the 22nd because it's the Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay. Any other meetings? Sorry, let me go back to the confirmatory bylaw that the clerk quite correctly pointed out I skipped past. Councillor Noyes, you have the resolution for first and second reading of the confirmatory bylaw.
Yes, Mayor Reddick, but before we do that, can I just ask, did I ever read resolution number 3?
I'm sorry.
I
Did
don't
you
think I
read
did.
resolution number 3?
That goes back to I know that it was put on the floor, but not, but I didn't read it.
Well, I had a conflict with respect to that. So, Madam Clerk, I presume that was dealt with.
It was moved by Councillor Noyes and seconded by Councillor Dubino.
Okay, because I have counsel, okay. I don't think I read it, but that's
Somebody
fine.
read it. Somebody dealt with it. Okay, would you like to move to confirmatory bylaw, please?
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Lubert, that bylaw number 72, 2020, to confirm the actions of council at its council and committee meeting held on July 13th, 2020, and its council meeting held on July 20th, 2020 is given first and second read.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor McDermott, you have third and final reading for the confirmatory bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that bylaw 72-2020 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to, thankfully you're here, Councillor Dubinow. The motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
We had trouble at the meeting last week. We didn't know who was going to take that on.
Fair enough. I'll try to be around more often. Councillor Noyes, are you okay seconding the adjournment?
Sure.
All right. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Noyes, that council adjourns at 8:04 p.m. to reconvene into a regular meeting of council on August 24th, 2020.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you all.